There's a lot of things. You don't even have a meeting with firemen on the site. You don't have a fire. You better have these people there to get this job. This is not, that shows that we're not a problem. That this, what we're doing is.
Yeah.
Copy of the subdivision regulations.
I do right here.
May I borrow that for just a moment?
Absolutely.
We'll have to look into this thing that closest to begin with. The clerk's office does this calendar. They might be doing it a different way now, where they put it on through Google. And you have to have a start time. We've never ended our meetings.
Can you hear us? Okay. Do you want everyone to test their mics again though?
Anyway, they put 7 tonight. So we're gonna have to have coordination.
Yeah. Yeah.
When all is said and done,
okay, I'm gonna have everyone, so can you hear me from this mic right now? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna have everyone here test their mics again.
Exactly. And if you want to give somebody an opening for that.
Test your mics again.
oh, you think
You
of
don't-
me now. If they're listening.
When you go to the cluster, we're talking about cluster, it says, well, basically, it's just major subdivisions, it shuts it off. I mean, when anybody brings a minor subdivision, 5 lots a year, when do we start to rest? Well, that's what we got here, basically. They did 8 lots to show what they could get as a use. But his preference is to go to 5. He wants 5 lots. Now, he has a cluster in that, he's probably still at.
So he's
giving.
That section of the regulation.
Well, he's not debating anything. He wants 5 lots. He wants.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
He's
Well, would you rather have 8 lots in a cluster? Because he can do it.
density for convention.
He did that to leverage to get to this. Because he knows he's a way for the right road.
Working. Okay, so he has a slight delay, but it's working. So. Check.
Do we have to check them all?
Can I see those rates in a second?
Of course.
When you get to them.
Just don't look at this. All right, perfect.
You don't see clusters on minor, although we have done a couple of clusters.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I haven't been in here since, I think, yeah, so. I just have it, so. Okay. I'm just like, oh my God. Oh, no.
I thought he had to have 24 feet of
All right.
paper, but no, he's right. So let's wait.
So they have to be in the court, so it's a show up, you know, when they come to us on here.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. We are good.
Okay, so then the question that you raised, and I think it's a good one, is perhaps none of this meeting was captured.
I would say that that's a distinct possibility. I'd say that there's probably I mean, there is the video recording, but without the audio, it's essentially useless. You don't, the whole point of having the record is having both.
So in this particular application, how far do I have to push the rewind button?
Very beginning, I'd say.
Okay.
Just to be sure.
Yep, done. Applicant, if I could pose, I appreciate they've already done this once. You can feel free to trim the fat, but for the record, just introduce it.
Very quick, Dave DeAmber, Bobcat Realty. Very quick, we shrunk a previous project down to 5. We're asking for a 5-lot minor subdivision. Technically, it will be a major because we need a waiver on the driveway width. But that's pretty much it. It shrank down from 8 or 10 out of the cluster and down into a minor. So.
Chris, you want to add anything to your presentation for the record?
For the record, Chris Duhamel, Dupree Engineering, offices in Cranston, Rhode Island. We had submitted plans that meet the checklist for a conventional subdivision with 8 lots. Cluster subdivision showing the same 8 lots are reduced in size from 2 acre to 1 acre. And the plan that's desired is what's before you now. It's a 5-lot subdivision. That's a single cul-de-sac.
So I was just about to go to the planning board members for comments against pre-application, no decision will be rendered. I don't mind leading off. I don't have any problem with this application. Just to be clear, the traveled way will satisfy the current specifications. The right of way, the traveled way, will satisfy the current regs once you bust into your portion of the site that's under your control.
Correct.
So the only thing I'd like you to know for your next presentation is I'd like you to come prepared to give us the title history to show that the 40-foot strip that you currently have was created on the record, however it evolved. Okay, just so that we're clear that you know how we got there.
Correct.
This is an unusual situation. I
Yes.
think it's atypical.
Yes.
Nonetheless, I want to be somewhat concerned about precedents and reducing the right-of-way width that we have as part of our standard. Again, I think we have a unique set of circumstances here.
Correct. We have Kelly Fracassa on board, and he will be prepared to answer those questions next time.
That's the only comment that I have. Any board members, anything else to add?
I guess I'm just a little confused about the minor major distinction. Described as technically minor, but will be reviewed as major. Clarification there about to the board. Standard of review.
Yeah, they're requesting a waiver from the 54 right, please correct me if I'm mistaken.
Correct. Yeah.
From the 54 right of way, which trips this.
Yes.
Request a waiver, you go from minor to, doesn't matter what the waiver is.
Correct. But and everything else will be built according to minor and will be compliant. The lot frontages, the coverages, the rates, and the road width, and sidewalk, whatever you guys need for the road, we'll be able to fit it in the 40 feet too, because even a 26-foot wide road with the 5-foot sidewalk will fit on the land we own. It's just the right of way, which is the in question.
Yeah, just another point here. It looks like this is gonna be the town road when you done. It's gonna be maintained and supported by town facilities. Is that correct?
Correct. That would be what we're asking. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else here wait? No, good.
No, I was gonna ask if you name the road after me.
We're open to suggestions.
Light lane.
All right, good. So,
Fair question.
Dr. Maynard, anything to add on this application?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to throw out an idea or a suggestion to the planning board. because this is a relatively simple subdivision, would you be amenable to combining the master and preliminary stages into one stage?
Yes, I can support that. Other planning board members, how do you feel about that?
Mr. Ron, I go along with it.
Carolyn, yes.
Good recommendation.
Thank you.
Maggie, anything from your end?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you. I realize it's a pre-application, public input is not necessarily sought, but is there anyone in the audience that would come in on this application this evening? I see no hands. Okay, I'll stand pre-application. I think you, hopefully you have everything you need to move forward.
Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Get the right name on this.
Okay.
All right, so once again, showing 35, we were on hold until 7 o'clock, so if you will, a recess till 7, at which time we'll take up the master plans for the Stumpfield solar project.
My pre-app fee. Thanks.
You go down the street to the other block, it's crumble. That's right. You passed it on the way here.
So it's actually the ordering.
But we had.
Did that today, actually, so I don't know where it's all the here or other municipalities are getting this kind of
That should change within the next 30 days or so. Because
But now we don't need so many.
you know, pizza, right?
What makes it so
Restaurant, man.
now,
There's
no show.
You just volunteered.
He did.
Yeah, it takes like lots But it's the doors have a couple, so then it doesn't work.
Yeah. And then once you get able to work, it's like, well, the interview so much.
Yeah.
Really.
And then you can't physically.
We've been doing
Okay.
this.
So we, I want next Tuesday off. You can give it Tuesday off.
Not coming in anyway.
To get some more stuff.
Yeah. Which one?
We should throw your name on that. Oh, right. Yeah.
It's the place to go. And there's a whole upstairs that requires that.
Yeah.
And the other daughter's, well, the manager there, knowing, her daughter's a multi-million, she doesn't know any projects, whole projects. Yeah, you must. Oh, there you're right. Her first husband, he was putting a blue collar shine. Somehow we got it with pretty good stuff. He's in the Fortune 500.
Hmm.
It's more than 2 digits. More than that. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, well, that's at 50. It's a shame.
Is he still single?
No, he's back.
Well, I was gonna say, you know, I know a guy. Labor prices is ridiculous. And, you know, at the other end with Dukers and, you know, these guys who are supposed to be selling plastic or selling chemicals, the labor shortage in that capacity is horrible. And it's gonna shortly hit the cement wall where we're going to start, you know, the prices are gonna go up or you can't get things. I mean, plant in Germany from last December for what they call plasticizer. And there's been none in North America since their inventory went down. And people who need it can't get it, what are they gonna do? And it's not just that material, it's everything. And it's, all of these derivative products that come out of petroleum and natural gas, demand is being split to the highest dollar. So the shortage is gonna be there. You know, at Christmas time this year, we're not gonna see a lot of imports from China because of the production shortage, the raw material shortages, and you have the traffic infrastructure that's broken with containers sitting in the docks for 6 to 7 months. They can't be cleared through customs fast enough. And then you get back to the vehicle shortage thing. You know, so you can't make the materials because you don't have the staff or the equipment. You can't get the equipment because the equipment manufacturer doesn't have the staff or the raw materials. Made in USA steel. It's a big, ugly circle that's much important. Bigger cash. It is messy and it'll happen. I don't see any short-term way out of it either. It's not like, COVID's going and then your supply is gonna be scared. I don't, it's not gonna happen that way.
Some things are really
Some things,
there are many things that are not possible to produce.
Yep.
My little daughter's son-in-law. So they church assembly found with my supervisor, she had 4. Louisville. They have in excess of 260,000 have certain pickups. Post-game. They more, when it comes to production right now. We don't want to get rid of all that short stuff that fast. Keep it stock. Photographs. One of the airports there, just one of the brand new Fords.
One thing.
And that was because the plant blew up. The plant blew up, and every US auto manufacturer is buying that same stream of product. But on the other hand, the used cars. Right?
I went to the dealers in 2007. Somewhere up in the $21,000.
It's a 14-year.
You know, I did look at it. It's right out there.
They can get it.
What am I gonna give it? Then you gotta light something. Well, that piece has had one top. $84,000.
And every individual performer is listening to my
My daughter traded her car, she owned a car for 2 years. She traded it in for another vehicle, she got more money for her car, which was a Nissan Altima. Then she did what she wanted. She got bonus money. I'm like. She's my little meow.
I had home runs on a couple of yards. Special concerns. One was most likely to die. $8,600,
I'll do that. Just getting the business of buying and selling cars.
Unless you get a job that says, I want 25,600, but I sold 30,000 5 years later. That was 5%. $50,000. That's 42,000 for 2,000. So a lot of us are saying staying at home. People just wait for 7 o'clock time. There's actually one here to chit chat.
So, hey, Maggie, question, maybe Jim, do we have to have this technology? Is it like required?
It's not required by law, no.
So why are we in this tangled web? I'm just wondering if the old way was just that camera, right? Nobody complained.
I'll complain. I thought it was
Yeah.
Maybe this thing is in the area.
Could be.
What, was it the wrong side of your that they were?
It's always the wrong side. No, it's, you can barely shoot him. I remember like, the angles loud, it's like, it's hard to, it's just no production value. You need explosions.
You're right.
The closer mics would help, but you know, when there was some sort of town drama, and you go back to watch that little section of tape, it's like you're struggling to hear whoever's standing 2 feet away from the podium. Somebody said something and nobody knows what it is.
Something out, they can still. That's when we do it for our corporate.
More wireless mic here. I don't care.
Well, it comes down to dollars.
Being able to hear it is nice.
Being able to hear it.
Yeah, you do.
Well, see, that for me is
So we don't have to do it, but it's something
So long, we got to pay for what we use better.
So they want to send it down. Yeah. And I haven't heard whether or not I.
I get the feeling that if some departments are doing it, then somebody would like to see all departments do it the same way. I think that's the path that would follow naturally, because we were very addicted to what was.
Given the time we have left to be two of these applications, see like opinion, I say, it's just gonna be to see if somebody wants to say something.
Do we have the intros? Yeah, we do the intro.
lot of questions. Water, sewer, road.
Ideally, you get to a point where you turn it on. Press go.
And that brings up the old saying, we'll have to get the lost map, it's easier to follow. Here we are, all sitting here, that little black box, I've got some.
I was telling Al.
Cars are sitting in a lot because they're on the
Computer
computer.
won't say anything. What should I do?
They're
If we get something done.
That money wheel's not turning.
Don't run, I can get this. October 6th. I know it's like here. Catch up.
I didn't notice it.
I didn't notice that it was a 7 either.
Second dates.
I like that.
Yeah. That's how I track my life.
Yeah.
And so the other one's 29.
And that's just
Yeah, I
shortly before the next.
did not notice that.
No.
So can we have a second one?
That and being able to have a screen share the presentation so that they can see it, we can see it.
Right, we'll have to decide on this tonight.
Right, to say otherwise. It's a short meeting.
Yes, yep.
funny you said that, I got an email today.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
You don't have to get out.
Sorry, I could use the exercise.
We were on the oral arguments. They're supposed to be decided.
Yeah, but you want to take it back.
Yeah, somebody can have it. And then,
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, no, not conclusive, no. But I say, extension of the night, of the evening.
Okay, right,
Yeah. I like it to wait till 10 o'clock. Yep. As much as we can. Younger than me.
Not by much.
You're not gonna want to do it. Just before you're gonna say, I'm hanging out. What, 6 years? Wait, September?
17.
A week after you,
Oh, is that right?
24. 16, 7.
My brother, 27. I'm doing one of those. Next one came out. The next one came out August 30th. And then still have three. Exactly. Next one came out September 27th. 3-year break, then I started the second half.
So we know what your family is doing around the holidays.
In fact, my grandfather was a doctor. He's like, "Man, you're gonna get out of the house at Christmas."
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yeah, exactly. And the law firm shut down for a week.
That's great. What you have?
Yeah, I got 3 sisters.
Wow.
It's crazy. I'll tell you though, COVID was tough. Because my husband was commingling with all that.
You don't get the time back. You
No,
lose somebody along the way, and that was lost an opportunity.
you know, the other thing is that I have grandnieces and grandnephews. So, like, some of their toddlers and stuff, they know if I get I'm normally, I'm free with them. I'm a stranger. Right to but, you know, with everybody's, that's what
I don't get it when they go to school, they're trying to get their shots, or they don't go to school. Right? Yeah, polio vaccine, sugar foods and everything. There's all these resistance to get vaccinated like it is today. I think it's some political connection. So I'll tell you what, any employer, I would say, hey, listen, mandates, they're all been approved by the FDA. You don't get vaccinated, you don't work here. You come back, you want to work here, go get vaccinated. That's our regulation.
governor just that for healthcare.
Healthcare people.
Now he's thinking about it for teachers. It's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, well, that's too bad. You know, wait, in this world, we have to have leaders. And we have to have people make decisions. And when, you know, this business is trying to make everybody happy, certain people happy. Yes, don't happen. This is the way, I say, you go out in the private sector, you work somewhere. This is the way we operate this company. If you don't like it, there's the door. Don't let it get you way out. That's the way you want it. You agree to our terms when you work. You know, work. What is done? Last week we just done our life and tonight we're gonna have a deluge.
The last one was around there, so there's 2 of them, there's a big crack.
Because that's going to be.
But I got a big generator out here. This building didn't have power. We lost internet. But we didn't, this building had power. Yeah. Huge generator. I got right after Hurricane Sandy. The Charlestown Town, a bunch of planners in the area, Reed's representative there, and everything. Okay, if they get any ideas for some, reviews and stuff, so I applied for some grants, got one for here, and I got one for Franny down the street. This is propane, the other one's diesel.
Oh, wow.
So Franny, but the money they did. They didn't hook up my business, this was. I was on a call last week.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Because I couldn't, for the town hall. Town hall next. As soon as the power goes out, that generator kicks in.
And do they?
We're right there with next. Right next. You want to go hybrid. The future of these meetings is hybrid. So, you know, what right guy.
Yeah.
That's good. That's why I'm glad I retired. We're gonna enable everybody in the area public to sit home, walling for a meeting like this. No, I think. Oh, yeah, hey, we're fucking, that's it. That's what it goes. I mean, Westerly, they've gone live stream their town council meetings, they used to watch at home. And that's fine, but I'm watching it as a TV program, not as a participant.
There were times you could hear, someone's sitting at home, that's okay, down hall. Got the gavel?
Ladies and gentlemen, 7 o'clock. Thank you. Turn to the agenda. Under all business and master plan, public informational meeting. Major land development project, Skunk Hill Road Solar, plat 18, lots 8, 13, 14, at 0 Arcadia Road, 0 Lisa Lane, and 145 Skunk Hill Road Solar LLC applicant. Applicant and or the representative present.
We have present, Mr. Chairman. Robert Craven, I represent the project. As I recall, we left off where there was going to be a public session after the board had an opportunity to ask some questions. There were some of those questions that arose that prompted, and I believe we kind of alluded to the fact that we would be presenting some supplemental information to answer those questions in the form of, one of them, for example, is Sightline, where you can see the proposed field from. So the first person I'd like to call to present his aspect of that supplemental information is Sergio Sorrenza. Sergio, can you come up here? Come on in.
Since we're getting back to live meetings, I want to make sure that you can see the presentation as well as the audience. So I have boards that are set up here in both directions. If we could have a few minutes.
Outstanding. Take your time. Thank you.
This is a good place. And then
Everyone can, you all can see this, correct? I'm just not sure if we're on the stand.
We used to use it that way.
Meeting, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
For 1 second.
Well, I think they're gonna want you over here.
You know, if that-
Yeah.
You'll have to come over to the mic, please, so you can be heard.
Yeah.
So we'll-
Sergio, I think they're gonna wanna, you wanna swear him in again? Okay. You don't need to be sworn in. I have one question for you, Sergio. You set up two different boards with information on it.
Correct.
And one is pointed in each direction. Are they identical to each other? The one with the brown and white maps on it and the other one looks like an aerial photograph?
They're identical. yes,
They're
face-
identical.
Facing the audience.
So one's available to the board, one's available to the public.
Correct.
Okay. Microphone's yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Sergio Chirenzia with Chirenzia and Associates, offices located at 99 Mechanic Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut. The plans that are before you this evening, we prepared the land survey for. The engineered site plans were developed by Woodward and Curran. And Denise Cameron from Woodward and Curran is here this evening. If there's anything specific to the engineered site plans that I cannot answer for you. Since we've been here last, it's been, I think, a couple months. And we're back in person now. It's nice to see everybody. The plans that are before you this evening that Attorney Craven has identified for the record have been submitted to you prior to the meeting. So you do have these in your informational packets and they have been provided to the public. We would have presented these at our last master plan meeting, but that was cut short and we've been postponed to this evening. So the two plans that I have up right now, one is an overall site plan, overall master site plan. That's one that's on the top of the easel right now. I will just bring your attention, I can't really point to things, and I know it's a little tough to see at the scale, but generally what has taken place since that meeting and so that we had some commentary at the last meeting, which identified some fence encroachments into the buffer setbacks. I believe there's 100 foot. We've since, or Woodward and Curran has since rectified a few of those locations. I can point them out to you. if you need to have them specifically shown. And then we also rectified a setback that came to a point off of an angle, which should have been a radius, which then fixed a fence. There was a fence line that was shown over that line. The line was incorrect. The setback has been rectified. So at this juncture, we believe that we've honored that setback requirement, and all of our fencing is outside of it. The second exhibit, I'm just going to walk over and put it up higher so everyone can see it. The second exhibit, just for the point of reference, to the right on the aerial photograph is properties off of Lisa Lane. And what we are trying to exhibit with this plan is a profile, a sightline profile of at least one of the residences, what they would see as they were looking towards the solar field. So we have a station diagram. Those are familiar with those. It's a line that shows exactly the sight line from one of the houses that cuts through the site, and then identifies the topography or the elevation at each right along that line of sight. And what this demonstrates per the requirements of the, I believe it was the pre-app or determination, or the zoning, I believe it was the zoning determination, was that any house from its first floor would have to be buffered visually from the solar field. So what this shows, if you're looking at it from right to left, is an example of this. We've only taken one section. If we need additional ones, we can show them, but this generally is carried throughout, and that there's the structure all the way to the right, an area of backyard until we get to some thick vegetation. The trees that we've represented on the profile are about 25 feet tall. I can tell you from driving through there, and I have some photos, that a lot of those trees are taller than the houses, and they're probably closer to 30 feet tall, if not taller. So we conservatively took that as the trees to be 25 feet tall, and then also beyond the forested area that shall remain forested, at least on our property, and is subject to wetlands, so likely would not be able to be cut down. Beyond that, we get to our open field, you can see on the aerial, and that open field is going to be subject to a berm, a proposed berm. And then on top of that berm is going to be some additional vegetation, some trees that will be planted at the apex of that berm. So what does all this tell you? So from the house all the way to the other end of the array, that is shown at about 1,000. This is about 1,000 feet section. So we can identify by this profile that the line of sight through all the trees, through that berm with the trees above it, you won't be able to see the array beyond those buffering. Furthermore, the area that is currently within the 200-foot Riverbank wetland, that's that curved line that is delineated through the field. George, our landscape architect, will get up and he'll go over some of the sketches that were sent to you. But basically that berm, in addition to the trees that will be planted at the apex of it, will also be vegetated, and that whole area will allow it to grow wild back to what it would have been if it's, in that, back to its natural state. That'll take some time to regrow trees and everything and the like, but for the most part, that's gonna, where what is now farm field, is going to revert back to eventually open and wild and undisturbed wooded area as it grows back and is untouched, because we anticipate to stay outside of a portion of that area that is not taken up by the berm
And that side of the berm will just be maintained with, low-lying pollinator species. George can get into what the seed mix is. But a portion of that will be able to revegetate and will remain undisturbed. So those are the more or less, these are in response to some of the concerns that we anticipate and that we heard from the commission of making sure that we're protecting neighbors from visual of this facility, solar facility. That being said, there might have been some other concerns. I think they may come up in the course of this public hearing. But I would like to turn it over to our landscape architect so he can get into a little bit more of the detail on those actual berms that will be installed to enhance that buffer.
Sir, before you leave the podium.
Yes.
Could you show us on the overall site plan where the profile has been run? An approximation is fine.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my orientation here. Should have put that on there for you. Basically, it runs through this area.
So you're looking at what I think you called section A at one point, is that true? The solar, the component of the solar facility, call that section A?
I'm not sure if it was identified on a section on the plan, but yes, it very well could have been. I have to go look at the master plan. So for the benefit of the audience, it's up in the northeasterly portion of the site, the section through here that comes actually towards some of the, I believe towards Michael Lane. And it cuts through, this berm area. Right up.
That's some handouts.
So I've handled this, for the record, my name is George Gifford. I'm a licensed landscape architect. My office is located at 4096 Mendon Road in Cumberland, Rhode Island. So I'm handling this, these documents a little differently. I have provided the board with these 8.5 by 11 size sketches that were generated and submitted to the planning department subsequent to the last hearing we had. And I have provided an enlargement on the board for the audience's viewing. The board will remember at the last hearing, we testified about the size of the berm that Sergio was just talking about. We testified about the plantings that are required to go on top of the berm and the placement of these berms, the plant varieties, and 3 different types of seed mixes that we're proposing for 3 different uses throughout the site. And I can answer some specifics about that if anyone has questions subsequent to the testimony that we entered in at the last meeting. The purpose of my discussion tonight is to just explain these 3 sketches that were submitted subsequently. These sketches describe some additional plantings that are being proposed. One is in that area, the first, SK1, are additional plantings that are proposed in the vicinity of the area that Sergio was just talking about, that area where the 12-foot high berm touches into a jurisdictional regulated area, regulated by the Department of Environmental Management, the 200-foot, what's called the 200-foot Riverbank Wetland. This is, of course, a dry area, but regulated because it falls within the 200 feet of the edge of the stream. It's a field. It's been maintained as a farmer's field for potentially hundreds of years. And as engineered on the plans now, the berm extends into this regulated area a little bit. We will be planting this area alongside the east side of the berm, and in particular where that regulated area is, we'll be installing additional native plantings on the east side of the berm. That is what this SK1 demonstrates. Furthermore, as Sergio mentioned, the SK1 drawing documents that farm field area between the berm and the wooded area associated with the wetlands will be allowed to revert to a natural wooded condition. The second sketch, let me put this over. The second sketch addresses additional plantings that are proposed at the south end of the central berm. So let me just indicate on an overall plan for the audience's benefit. So there's a large berm on the northeast corner of the property, and then there's another berm a little further south of that. This berm is also being treated, as discussed at the last meeting, vegetated with some nectaring plants for butterflies and moths. And plantings on the top of the berm, evergreens on the top of the berm for screening. But in addition, what we've added now are some additional evergreen trees on the southeast toe of this berm to additionally screen actually the berm itself and not give it such an abrupt feel at the south end of the berm. The third sketch, SK3, the third sketch simply addresses an old gravel roadway that extends off of Lisa Lane southerly into the property. There's a history of this gravel roadway that's been used for various access issues, and that is no longer going to be necessary. So what we've done on this sketch is to indicate that we intend to plant perpendicular to the roadway, plant some evergreen trees to block it off and visually demonstrate that that roadway will no longer allow vehicles to go through. So that concludes my explanation of the updates since the last hearing, and I can address any questions if you have any.
Good, thank you.
I have a question. The original berm, the original plans showed a very shallow angle on the berm. I was curious if we altered that at all. A narrower angle, like the angle that goes 45 degrees, and this looks like it's around 12 degrees. 3-to-1 slope approximately.
3-to-1. Yeah.
There was concern about as far as it goes into
So
Plains
we,
area, no man's land, for lack of a better term. Have you reduced that at all?
the plans that are under review right now, these master plan plans, which are intended to be conceptual in nature, these plans do still show that 3-to-1 slope. And it is a gradual slope. It's a conservative way of designing a berm because you can stabilize berm soils, side slopes with seeding and with no need for any sort of erosion control fabric. There have been some discussions and we'll be looking into the possibility of steepening the side slope if necessary to minimize impacts if that's necessary. If that happens, we probably will be looking at using some stabilizing fabric, some fabric that can degrade in place after it's done its job.
Is there a permit required from DEM to alter within the 200-foot Riverbank Wetland, or is that something that needs to be done?
The answer to that question is the quick answer is yes. However, you'll notice that in the profile, you can see that a good portion of that 200-foot has been historically disturbed. When that type of disturbance predates DEM regulation, it's exempt from, as long as you don't change it, if you keep it the same way. We anticipate we're going to be enhancing it, so that will look favorably upon by the DEM officials. But if we are going into virgin area that is pristine, that is wooded, you can't go in and just go clear that, and we don't intend to do that.
Okay, so regardless, DEM is reviewing this, we'll have to review the section of the plan.
Absolutely, yep, because of the wetlands, and we also need a RIPDs, a Rhode Island Pollution Discharge Elimination System stormwater permit. So this will go through a full preliminary determination review. We hope that it will be considered what's called an insignificant alteration as part of that preliminary determination and review.
Thanks.
If there are no more questions, Mr. Chairman, then that's the end of our supplemental presentation. I believe the next order of business is the public.
Mr. Chairman, you can allow members to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, before we go to the public, planning board members, questions or comments on the most recent testimony? Anything else you want to know? Okay, good. Jim, anything from your end? No. Maggie, anything on your end? That's it. So we go to public input on the project as a whole, as well as the current testimony from the senior. Anybody who cares to weigh in? See a hand. Step up to the podium, introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, just at the end of the public comment, Mr. Craven and I are going to try to set up the schedule for my experiences next hearing.
Sure.
So just so it's on the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Richard Noel. I live on Lisa Lane. I've only spoken once to the planning board, and that was when the initial proposal was made decades ago, evidently. And I said at the time that if you sent someone out into Hopkinton and said, find me the least appropriate place to put an array, they would have returned you this one and you would not have been disappointed. It was the beginning of a long, we had very little information. We're groping around, trying to get a handle, wrap our arms around this. And we had very little hard data about the impact of these things on a community. Fortunately, last fall, a professor of economics at the University of Rhode Island did a comprehensive academic study and of 400,000 homes in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. and discovered that there was a significant, substantial damage to all of the properties to the tune of 5% when you removed a desirable farm forest and replaced it with industrial scale solar. Since that time, I've not seen anything that said, unless you put up a berm or unless you plant more, little trees and bushes, there's nothing that changes that. And the other point that I wanted to make was this impact is evidently up to a mile. In fact, they studied up to 3 miles, but up to a mile away from this site, that impact is felt. And I would point out that that is everything in Hopkinton between Lucasville Pond and Wyoming Pond. There's a lot of properties in there. So even though you say, well, I can't actually see it from my house because there's a arborvitae in the way, there's nothing in the study that says that that's mitigated in any way. And I would suggest that the reason for that obvious, this big change in the value of the adjoining properties is that the comprehensive plan here, going back to that, is very clear about the nature of uses that are permitted. And this is an absolutely, there's no amount of berms, there's no amount of shrubberies, you can't import birds from South America. It's not an appropriate use. It was inappropriate then, and it's inappropriate now.
Very good, thank you. Other members, audience?
I'd like to reserve comment, but just ask some questions of the experts. Yeah, my name is Eric Bibler. Okay, sorry. And I just want to alert the board that there's a lot of confusion around tonight's meeting. There are some people that are not here this evening that I think would also like to comment. So I hope we won't close public comment entirely. Just a couple of questions on the material that's been presented. The sight lines that were, or a sight line to the solar field that was presented from a residence on the ground floor. Has any work been done to determine what the sight lines will be from a second story of a house that is in a butter or a deck?
Where's Sir Joe? Here we go. Could you address that one for us?
I can. The answer is no. Okay, so obviously everybody doesn't live in a one-story house. I think that's important. Second thing is this has come up before on other solar projects. The one that comes to mind is Revity, where the planning board made a pretty strenuous statement that the developer does not get credit for the buffering from trees on abutters' properties. One of the plans that we saw that described all the trees that were buffering the view, the vast majority of those trees that were characterized as being 25 feet and taller were on the property of residents. So one of the other things that I don't think was done was any sight lines from the boundaries of any of these properties. If you own a property, you own it to the edge of your property. You're not obligated to maintain trees on your property you don't want to be, to buffer the site of the thing that you don't want to see. So I would urge the planning board to take into account that there should be no credit given for buffers from trees that belong to butters on their own property. And I think it's very important that these solar panels, from the look of that one view we saw, are going to be marching up the hill, away from these properties that are a lower elevation. So it's going to be very hard to hide them even with an 8-foot berm. That's especially going to be true from a tall house.
12 feet? 12 feet berm?
Oh, I don't know. I thought it was
Yeah, I'm impressed that it was a 12 foot berm.
whatever the size is, it's finite. And if you have a grade that's rising, it may not be sufficient to block those views. Just asking you to consider that. Another issue that's come up on many projects is that sometimes we have these buffers that are promised, they're planted, and that's the end of the obligation. The developer goes away. I just wonder whether there's would be any provision to maintain The trees on top of the berm, what happens if they're planted and they aren't properly cared for, and 3 years later, they all die? And so these trees that were intended to be, 15, 25 feet may not exist, may die, may have gaps. That's another issue. So we're counting on this berm to do a lot of work. So those are just my questions and comments on this aspect of it.
Good, thank you. Anyone else in public? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jim Dillon. I live on Lisa Lane, and I do want to look at a specific part of the chart and ask a question after I say that I agree with my neighbor that this really is not the place to put it. But if it's going to have to be put there, I want something else known. We just had a nice little storm. It was a tropical storm. It took down a lot of trees in the neighborhood. It took down my best tree. If I can point out and ask this question. There's a gap in this berm. Okay, my house is there.
So let me interrupt for a moment.
Okay.
So please continue.
Right.
But when you return to the podium,
Yes.
I'd like you to repeat.
I will. Okay, I want to point out this gap in the two berms. I'm right here. The trees that they're saying are going to block the view are more than 90% deciduous trees. We don't have leaves on those trees more than 6 months a year. We have less than that. This is New England. We all know that we get a long winter. My question is, why not have the berm continuous so that the views for these houses don't go directly up into the field of solar? From my house here on the corner, my best tree was here. It got knocked down. My view is now going to be that way. That's nature. The berm only comes to here. So anything from here down, I'm going to see. And anything in this gap, I'd like to see that gap be filled and not depend on trees that could easily come down if we got a storm like they had in New Orleans. I know it's once every 100 years, but we lost a lot of trees. Now I will repeat for the record. I'm trying to find out, is there a way that berm can be extended completely? Fill that gap. Don't depend on, again, as Eric said, mostly neighbors' trees that can easily come down in hurricanes. If we know hurricanes are more and more frequent, we're getting them more often. I lost the best tree on my property. I never thought it would come down. Unfortunately, it did. Now, but that's on my watch. But these other trees, they're deciduous. So 6 months of the year, you're going to see through them. Okay, that's just a fact of life. Why can't we have the berm continually extended is my question. That if I have to have this in my neighborhood, which I really, really don't want, and I am one of the 150-foot abutters. So those are my questions for the board and for the people putting this up. Thank you.
Let's stop right there and see if we can get you an answer. Who on the design team can field that question?
I'll try not to be as wordy as Sergio. The answer is yes. We can continue the berm.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the time. I'd like to say one more thing. I was sitting at home. I had no idea that this was going to be a live meeting until my neighbor called me to say, boy, this is live. It's not on Zoom. The Zoom I was watching at home. I know you guys tried. You had some technical difficulties. We got the audio, but my wife's sitting at home and she's watching. She can't see any of this, none of that. So anyone who's home on Zoom isn't getting the great effect that we had before. I don't know why we weren't given any kind of notification that this was going to be a live one when the last 4, which I've watched till 10 o'clock, getting to this. Maybe we can do a better job on that the next time. Thank you.
We were live last month too. We were here.
But you use the camera to point out all of these things, which you're not doing this time. Nobody at home gets to see that.
It's nice that they can watch it these days.
We will look into that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
From that camera, you can see those. So that's what that camera is for.
Right, but I will show you a picture that my wife took of the computer and what you can and cannot see.
Let's see what we can do. Anyone else in the audience that wishes to be heard on this one? I see this hand right there. Yes. Name for the record.
Yep. So my name is Greg Honored. I'm at 11 Grand Sarah Drive. I had submitted a letter. I had a few things that haven't really been answered or come up, so I just will try and breeze through those as quickly as I can. The biggest one that on the southern portion of the whole property, I don't know if I need to go up and point it out on the map, but there's kind of a choke point that's extremely narrow between the Gordon property and properties ours on the end of Arcadia, and then what's the name? Oh, I'm sorry, Grand Sarah, and then the other development off Arcadia. Anyway, comes down to a very narrow point. I believe it's about 60 or 70 feet wide. That's right where a road is supposed to go through. There's also a river that goes through that as well. I wanted to clarify, is there that same 100-foot setback required for a road going in there?
Hold that thought. It might be handy for the record if somebody could point, sort of a good problem for me with the area that we identified.
Yeah.
Just point on the overall site plan as to the area of interest.
That's what I want to get clarification on.
Oh,
Would you like me to go?
Sure, on this map. So, like. On that.
Again, once you get back to the podium, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you were pointing.
Yeah, I'll try to give the best descriptors as I can. So as you enter the site from Arcadia Road, we're following an existing drive. That's a dirt pathway. It goes from east to west, and it follows more or less the property line along the southern boundary of that property. It then goes in a northwesterly direction to a crossing in the wetland, and I think that's the stream or the river that I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but this gentleman Rick was alluding to. His question is that the road that comes through there, I believe, is it subject to the same 100-foot setback off of the property line? And my understanding is that 100-foot setback is to the arrays and not the access drives that are approaching the arrays.
Let me just clarify, was that in fact your question?
Yes, correct. First question.
Okay.
So the second question was the river that's right in that same vicinity is currently forded. So there's that small path right now. The river goes right over the top of it. That river goes right into our property. We have a bridge that crosses it. We wanted to know what the plans were for that and how that's going to be impacted by drainage. I know we can't get into the tiny details right now, but we would like to know that since it goes immediately into our property within 30 feet or so.
So as I alluded to before, there's a DEM permit that we have to obtain. We are going to, as part of that, we will have to evaluate, or Woodward and Curran, working with them, they'll have to evaluate that we don't impact the drainage ways that are currently go through that area with the crossing that we're proposing. And there's actually an existing crossing that's already there. We are going to have to improve it to a certain extent, which will require full DEM approval. And as part of that, we do what's called an impact avoidance and minimization. Typically, existing trails and drives, albeit if they're underutilized now, we would improve them to make sure that they're safe and passable. But at the same time, do not impose any more impact on the environment than is necessary. That's where that impact avoidance comes from. We avoid as much as possible taking the least impactful path. So albeit that we'll be using that path, we will have to improve it the water course will not be impacted, and we have to prove that to the Rhode Island DEM as it's under their jurisdiction.
I guess last, just to clarify as well, with the road, is there any setback requirement with this road going in?
Setback from the boundaries?
Yes, from our boundaries.
It's my understanding that driveways do not require any setbacks.
That is it. Thank you.
Yep, I see a hand back there. Name for the record, please.
My name is Janice Tapley. I live on 20 Lisa Lane. I just wanted to add in a little bit about what we were speaking of before with the sightlines. I'm very close to the proposed berm, and I do want to make sure that this is sufficient, that not just standing on the ground, you can't see anything. I don't want to see anything. We only have one level, which is great for these purposes here, but I do want to make sure we look out the window. I don't see solar panels, that we stand on a deck or go in our pool and I don't look out at solar panels. I'm very concerned about this, that this is going to just ruin the whole look and feel of why we moved down here. It's very close. I don't feel that this is the correct place for this type of installation. It's far too large. This is a residential area that they are proposing this in. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to something on a smaller scale. I'm also concerned that if this does go through in the building phase of this, that just what would the traffic be like? Truck traffic coming on Arcadia Road and Skunk Hill Road. And these are narrow roads. These are roads that, you know, people are walking and bicycling, jogging. You see people out there. I can't even imagine what it would be like and how long this would take to get, you know, trees out and materials in and to just build this massive array. So I just wanted to voice those concerns. And I guess that's about it right now. I did submit a letter to some of the planning board members and I hopefully you read it. And I just wanted to make that known that, you know, this is very close to my backyard. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Hey, listen, before you leave the podium, would you be able to, perhaps with Sergio's assistance, would you be able to identify on the overall site plan where your property is located so that I can have a feel for your concern and a better feel?
Yes.
Good.
Your name?
Janice Chapman.
Chapter.
Yeah.
No.
Oh. Well, that's not.
Isn't that home?
Oh, yes, I guess this.
That's-
this-
that's-
that's correct. This says,
Yeah.
Phillips?
Yeah.
Well, they moved.
Okay.
Yes, that's us.
And Sergio,
Yeah.
Sergio,
I'm sorry.
can I see that, thank you, please? Thank you. Appreciate that. Hey, anyone else in the audience who should be heard? I see a hand back there. Come forward, name for the record, please.
My name is David Pierce. I live on Arcadia Road, Plat 18, Lot 9. I am at the point where hopefully I'm not going to see any solar panels, but I will be looking at, guessing a number of telephone poles that presently we do not have any telephone poles on that side of the road. And this view is my view out my kitchen window. So my question is, how many telephone poles am I going to see in this field before it connects to the existing electrical system?
Very good. And I'm going to, sir, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Could you perhaps, again, with Sergio's assistance, show us on the plan where your property is relative to the project?
So what number is your property? 51 Arcadia Road.
This first property right here along Arcadia Road.
Flat 18 lot 9.
Yes.
So you're concerned with the interconnection?
If I could, get an answer to that.
Now, to my understanding, according to all the public hearings that we had with the zoning people, back a year ago, whatever it was, all the wires for this system are supposed to be underground up to some point. I don't know what point that is, but that's why my concern is the telephone poles, because that's going to be my view out my kitchen window. So I would like to know if that's still going to happen, and possibly make a suggestion that according to the presentation that they did at the public hearing, all these wires were supposed to be, they were going to be drilling underneath the soil, underneath the wetlands, and doing that. So if that equipment is there, what I would suggest is putting 1 or 2 electrical panels on the side of the road where I live, and going under the road and coming up the other side of the road to existing telephone poles. I don't know if that's still the plan for them to drill under all these wetlands or not. Nobody's talked about that at all.
We're gonna get you an answer to that question as soon as they're done consulting back there.
So there are no berms blocking my view of some new telephone poles, however many there's going to be. Hopefully it's not anything like what's going on Route 91.
Got an answer for us?
So at this time, we don't know exactly how many poles, but it could be as many as we think approximately 7 poles that would be clustered at the entrance to the Arcadia site.
Got it. So what about the, forgive me, I don't remember the representations that you're alluding to, not that I'm questioning that. But what about the underground scenario? Is that off the table?
The ability to put underground as opposed to poles?
Well, underground, maybe to an area that's more into the site. I don't even know if that was discussed.
My experience is they typically, for interconnection, they need a certain number of poles in that area for certain disconnects. Yeah, I don't know if it's feasible to go underground.
Got it. Sir, is it your representation that at some previous hearing, there was a different strategy presented?
Well, I went to all the public hearings when they,
And which ones are you referring to?
the ones for the zoning, when they changed the zoning from residential to, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
They told us at those public hearings that they will be drilling under the wetlands because all the wires will be underground.
Understood. Okay, so I don't think we have an answer to that right away, but I think it's incumbent upon us to perhaps review those proceedings in light of what's being currently presented.
Okay. That's all I have for
Sorry,
now.
we don't have an answer for you right now, but
Yep.
duly noted.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just want to also put on the record that there are a series of poles that extend into the property currently right now.
In that same area?
In that same area. It will not be the same, density of poles, but there are poles that run into the property over there to get to the properties beyond it.
Anyone else in the audience this evening? Wishing to be heard? I see no hands. Sir, is there something you wanted to add to the mix? Yes, sir.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I don't know.
that's Paul Ryan. I'll put my name on the law offices at 201 Washington Road, Barrington, Rhode Island. We had a lot of confusion about the last couple of meetings. In fact, the first one, the notice was defective. So scheduling witnesses was very difficult. I mean, expert witnesses. And then following the
Superior Court decision last month. And then another decision that had nothing to do with this case by a Superior Court judge in Providence Superior Court last week regarding a planning board hearing and whether neighbors did or did not have to present expert real estate testimony on the impacts to their property. We're in a position where we have to do so. And we have engaged the services of an expert, and Linda Steer will be our wetlands biologist. Additionally, the solicitor for the planning board sent an opinion letter to Mr. Craven and I this afternoon, which I'm not going to be able to respond to this evening. And I would say to the board that I will get my response to the solicitor and to Mr. Craven at least a week ahead of the meeting. The problem is the October 6th regular meeting that you would have, our expert, real estate expert is not available. He's literally available every Wednesday between now and October 6th. Linda Steer is available again every meeting but the 6th of October. September 15th is Yom Kippur. In this day and age, I can't imagine scheduling any public meetings on any religious holiday that's commonly observed. And so it leaves us with the 22nd and the 29th of September as the dates. And if the board would have a special meeting, those are the two available dates for my witness.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm gonna go right to Mr. Lanfear on this. Jim, this is, we talked about the 15th, that's obviously off the table for very good reasons. This is probably the opportunity to talk about what the planning board is postured to do a special meeting or some alternative, given the fact that they're expressing on their voices.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that September the 29th is open at this point in time.
Planning board members, special meeting, September 29th. What are your feelings? I may not be available. I am not. But that's all too. I'm available. Could be done. Not available. Okay. What was the other option? I'm sorry, 22?
22nd.
Not available.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, our solicitor is not available that night.
Okay, so those two apparently don't work. Could we consider a special meeting in October?
Yes.
Yeah, was that?
That's fine, Mr. Chairman.
Trying to be as accommodating as I can. Planning board members, what is your October schedule?
Wednesdays are all.
So we're gonna have a regular meeting on the 6th, yes?
Yes.
I'm back in town on, just after that meeting, so I can be available Wednesdays after that.
This is Ron, I'm okay with October. I have no plans for any October. So forgetting what I do. I'll be leaving again on the night, and I won't be back until.
If I would suggest the 20th, in light of that,
Yeah. How about we check with the applicant?
Yes.
Does that work for the applicant?
I just checked with Sergio. Is that all right with you?
October 20th?
Yeah. Look
sir,
at,
20th,
look at the gang. You all set?
Is fine.
Jim,
All set?
work for you, Maggie, work for you,
I believe so, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
planning board members are all good.
Yes.
Denise, is that all right with you?
I will be on the calendar.
You'll be in Chicago?
We'll try to find her.
All right.
that gonna work?
Denise is indicating to me that she'll find another, one of the engineers from her firm.
Okay, so special meeting on the 20th to handle your presentation. Primarily. Good?
October 20th, the usual time, 6, 7?
That's good question.
6 o'clock is not the usual time.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we need a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to mention that the board has not taken a site walk on this property yet. Might the board want to line one of those up before a decision is made? That's my first thought. And my second one is we would need the board tonight to continue this matter to a date certain, which looks like October 20 at 6 p.m. And we also need an extension from the applicant. Right now, this application is only valid through September the 8th. So we would need an extension past that October 20.
I see you with the extension right now.
Yes.
Okay. To a point that I would suggest needs to be at least
I think we did,
November 3rd.
yeah, okay, November 3rd, okay. Is that fine with you, Jim? Okay,
At which point we can talk about it again, but that at least gets us to our next meeting.
yes. Okay,
This site view is an excellent idea, but I don't want that to get in the way of our scheduling October 20th. So whether we do a site view before, I don't know if we're going to be in decision mode by the 20th, or we do it after. Site view is an excellent idea, it should be done. Might depend on what folks' schedules are between now and then.
If I could suggest, because we need to do this 2 by 2 like the ARC, we would ask, I think, we could do this administratively, have the applicant provide some dates and times that they're available to show the property to 2 members of the planning board, and then a series of dates, and then you could fill in and pick the dates that work best. But we don't need to do that this evening. We can do that administratively through Mr. Creighton's office and Jim's office.
Okay, excellent idea. I'm sorry to hear we've got to do the 2 by 2 thing again. So may I pose on Jim, Mr. Creighton,
Yes.
to sort out a couple of dates and times?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so unless there's anything else that's going to come before us this evening on this application, I'm prepared to entertain a motion to continue this to a special meeting on Wednesday, October 20th, commencing at 6 p.m.
thank you for the board's attention. See you in October.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're not going on the site walk with us?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm bringing the cedar donuts. so.
Oh, all right. Like, yes.
Who seconded that? Was that you, Emily? Okay.
So, excuse me, folks, I'd love to have you all for cake and cookies, but this is still an ongoing meeting. I'd love to see you discussing this between yourselves, but may I impose on you to take it outdoors? Moving forward, the next item on the agenda. Preliminary plan, public hearing. Rushy Brook. 140 units, comprehensive permit. Class 3, 2, 3 lots. 1, 4, 6, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 21, 22, 25, 27, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 41, 42, 44, 46, 48, 50, 52, 54, 56, 58, 60, 62, 63, 65, 67, 68, 69, 70, and 71. Located at 130 and 0 Dry Hill Road, 0 Washington Drive, 0 Red Road, 0 Green Lane, LR6-A owner, LLC, and Real Financial Partners applicant. Before we begin, Maggie, if I can impose on you, it's a public hearing. Is the public hearing been continued? Do I need to open it? What the record stand?
I believe this was continued as a date certain.
So the public hearing remains open.
It remains open.
Mr. Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, William Landry representing the applicant. We did begin the public hearing process on the 4th of August. And we took away from that meeting a list of tasks that the board and in certain cases, the members of the public identified as being important to address as this review stage proceeds. And it was clear at that meeting that the board was going to have its outside consultant, Crossman Engineering, tackle one of the issues that came up that evening, and that was the whole business of off-site improvements. And that issue involved the memo from 2010 by the DPW director and what was meant by those requirements and the issue of feasibility and practicality. And that was an issue that consumed a good segment of that meeting. And there were a number of other concerns that the board raised, the need for some type of testing of the aquifer and wells as opposed to additional study and opinions and so forth, and some additional information on the community septic systems. There are other issues as well that the board identified. We did have contact from Crossman Engineering. We received, the usual very comprehensive report. We received it on August 25th, which was last Wednesday. And so we've had, 4 or 5 business days to evaluate that report. It didn't get to the issue of outside, and I assume that you've read the report. It didn't get to the issue of off-site improvements, except to point out some technical observations. That was something that was left for a further memorandum. The report, identified itself as memorandum number 1 and was a preliminary memorandum on a number of engineering issues. It did cover some of the other concerns the board had, including the one I just mentioned, the desire to have some type of a testing protocol here and not have this process be completed without some provision for real wells to be dug and real results. That was something the chair underscored, and it makes an awful lot of sense. We have a lot of paper that's piled up over the years on those issues. After sending Eric our report, Steve Cabral, very capable guy, contacted Eric and suggested that instead of trading, huge reports, that the engineers get together, perhaps go out in the field, look at the off-site improvements, and have a professional exchange on these items. There are 45 things that were identified in the report. It's 6 or 7 pages. 29 of them are numbered, but several have bullet points with additional comments. The vast majority, number-wise, are technical, the usual technical comments that we used to seeing. adding contours on certain pages, more space between the sewer pipes and the water pipes, additional grading in certain areas, tweaks to the design of the stormwater ponds, redesignation of sub-catchment areas in the drainage program. Those are things that professionals can work out, and I don't, see any major issues with any of those things. The balance were some of those bigger picture items like off-site improvements that still need to be worked on, and the protocols for additional testing and so forth, and additional information on the community septics, so that this process can proceed efficiently. We think we have to provide Steve and his firm with information that's pertinent on these issues. We've gone back now and looked at those studies, and there was a tremendous amount of work that was done with respect to testing the aquifer, neighboring wells. LFR did a huge study, very comprehensive, to try to understand the aquifer and the water availability that's there. And then GZA was hired, and for almost a year, we had these meetings once a month where GZA would come in and provide reports. RAB Engineering, which is now Beta, prepared a number of reports and analyses on traffic issues and offsite improvements. And those, I don't know if Crossman's even aware that database exists. We all agreed that it's not enough to just say there were a bunch of studies in 2010, let's go ahead and build this project. But we want to make sure that they have those items. We're all on the same page. The engineers can get together and maybe take something that's this big and make it, this big for all of us. And we'd also like to be, reasonably comfortable. There's always something that comes up that somebody never thought of, but we'd like to be reasonably comfortable that we're working from a list of the issues that are really on the table, and that we can start with that universe and pare it down, without a lot of new things coming up. And that's something else that could be vetted in this process that's going to take place between Eric and Steve. And I don't want to speak for either one of them. I know Steve is here, but it seems like this was something that the two of them thought would be a really good idea. So my suggestion tonight, now you may want to have Mr. Cabral go through his memo. I'm not going to tell the board what to do, but I do think it would make a lot of sense for the engineers to get together, for us to be able to provide some responses in writing like we usually do, but after there's been a face-to-face meeting, so we don't have just big piles of memos going back and forth. Again, we received this the day that the agenda closed for new submissions last Wednesday. So, and there's an awful lot here to tackle. And rather than get into one or two or three things, our preference would be to have that process take place and come back next month, ideally. Maybe that's not enough time, 1 month, but we'd like to at least have it as a placeholder in the hope that we can reach agreement on as many of these issues as possible.
I certainly am in favor of that. Thanks, Steve. I don't want to speak for you, but I took a look at your memo, a lot of technical stuff. My preference that the two design professionals kind of sort this out before the planning board digs in. I'll wait to hear what my colleagues have to say. That would be my 2 cents.
Yes, I'm all of the fact that we can cut away, get right down to the nitty gritty, and actually get some good hard facts. I'd be on board with that.
Thank you.
You guys okay with that?
How would we keep this transparent?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. How would we keep this process transparent? I know that as a board, we are required to, make sure that we don't have a quorum, to prevent a rolling quorum. Is the same thing, does the same apply to consultants from, different parties in order to maintain sort of an ethical separation? I don't know the answer.
I'm not quite sure of the question on transparency. I mean, it's commonplace for an applicant's professional and our consultant to sort out what happens at station 2+0.
Sure.
Without us making it a public issue. But is that the question? I'm not quite sure.
No, I understand that there's back and forth, and there always is. I guess what I'm wondering is, ethically, the town hires an engineer that's separate from the applicant's engineer to ensure that, nobody's getting paid by the wrong person. If you take those two people and you put them together, they're going to have a private conversation and no one knows what happens. Do we lose that sort of ethical separation?
No, because I think we have our consultant coming back, I hope, but again, don't let me speak for you, saying that we met on this particular date, this was the topic, we resolved what happens at station 2+0, and we're good.
Okay.
Steve,
Yes, I do agree, but.
Come on. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve Cabral with Crossman Engineering of 151 Centerville Road, Warwick. Anytime that I meet with an applicant's engineer, I also invite the town planner to attend. And I make sure that Jim is aware of the topic. And if he's comfortable with the topic that we could meet alone, then we do. So it's not as though we meet, at will. We always coordinate it through the planning office. Okay.
So John, what do you think? Does that make you feel more comfortable? Maybe you weren't uncomfortable to begin with.
I wasn't uncomfortable to begin with. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't opening the door for some sort of questioning down the road. If it expedites the process, I'm all for it, because I don't need any more of those papers.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would also note that in other towns, larger towns that have more resources, they have what's known as a technical review committee that vets these technical issues amongst all the various professionals. And then the planner is able to reduce that down to a manageable report for laypersons who sit on the planning board, some laypersons. So I think to the extent that you can have the technical details worked out, hammered out, and then you get a concise recommendation from your consultant, is the best use of the board's time. I also think there are no ethical issues whatsoever in regards to that standard practice, and all the ethical requirements apply to the city board members and not to professional staff.
Mr. Chair, just I think what Ms. Hogan said, the last piece was very important, that what comes out of this are still recommendations. These folks are not deciding anything for either party. They remain until the board passes on them a series of recommendations.
Good. Okay, so you're gonna take a little time, you're gonna sort this stuff out. So is it your recommendation that, we continue to a date certain? I can check with Jim, we put it on next month's agenda. If that works, great. If you need another month, that's great too. What would you like to do?
Our preference would be to have it on the next agenda. And as a courtesy to the board and to Jim, we would check in with him, as we get close to that date, so that he can understand and the board can understand what its calendar really is going to look like on that day, and not tell you the day before that, we need another month. Jump rock to rock that way, so that we can, make an effort to be ready to come back in October. It feels like a lot to me to be able to do, but if we can, great. If we can't, we'll let you know in a timely way, and then maybe go off to the following month.
Jim, I'm gonna come, sorry, maybe there's a question.
And just one suggestion that in the interim, like you did with the last application, if we could arrange, Mr. Landry's office could arrange with Jim to provide some dates and times where the planning board members could go out to like to review this site. It's a large site. It looks like it would require some time for us to go out there.
Golf carts.
You're gonna bring a golf cart, right? So, and before the weather begins to turn cold and all the rest of it, you can get these site visits in now in the fall months. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Very good, thank you, excellent idea. So Andrew, can you coordinate that?
Absolutely, yes.
And so Jim, I'm gonna come back to you, I'm gonna ask about how your agenda looks for our next meeting of the 6th. Is this something that we can post to that agenda with the conditions that we just discussed?
Yes, absolutely. I was planning on bringing this back for October 6th anyway. And also, we have an extension in effect until October 13th, is my understanding. If Mr. Landry can concur with that.
Yes, that's correct.
That would
So-
appear to be adequate, at least to get us to the next point in time.
Correct. And if Mr. Landry calls my office and finds that they really are not ready for the 6th, at least this will be on the agenda, because we'll have to continue the public hearing to another date certain. And I'll be looking for a motion from the board tonight as well to continue to October 6th at 6 p.m.
So have we concluded our efforts this evening on this, with the exception of the motion?
And then at that time, if Mr. Landry and his client are unable to proceed on the 6th, I would request that we get a written communication that also says what he's extending the date for completion of the review to, so it's in the record. And that way he doesn't have to come there.
So would it be appropriate to get that extension this evening, or?
Well, I think if the protocol, we won't request an extension without correspondingly extending the board's time, and that'll be in writing, and now it's on the record of these proceedings.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to come before us this evening on this particular application? Otherwise, I'm prepared to entertain the motion to continue. Good. So if someone would like to make a motion to continue this, our next regular meeting on October 6th we're starting at 6 p.m.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Would you be willing to entertain any potential comments from the public at this point? That we are in the midst of a public hearing, which is open.
I can certainly do that if we certainly have time. I'm good with that before we make a motion.
Yes.
So Landry, you acceptable with that?
Of course.
So if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to offer thoughts or comments on this particular application this evening, this would be an ideal time. Yes, sir. I see your hand. Come forward, name for the record, please.
John Landy, 122 Dye Hill Road, on the property in front of Brushy Brook. Again, about my well, 28-foot driven point, I'm worried about it. There's two ponds. One is 200 foot from me and the other one is 400 foot. I make them out to be about 165 feet. I don't know how deep or how much water they'd hold, but these are going to hold the water from all the runoff from the roads and everything else. Is it possible for them to move them a couple hundred feet back and put the exit wherever the water exits out in a different direction so it don't excuse me, so it don't come downhill?
So hold that thought, hold that thought. So, Mr. Landry, it sounds like detention basins of some kind.
Yes.
Get you to just consider a possible relocation if that's feasible.
We'll add that to the list of things.
Yeah, something else?
Thank you. Yeah, there's 25 foot between, about 25 foot between the edge of my property to the entrance road. We would like it to be as much vegetated as possible, so we don't see the cars coming down. Bad enough they're going to be coming by the front of the house, but at least block that much of it. And then one other thing, the septic, which we just lost our power this week. Each septic system is going to have a pump. What are they going to do when we lose power like this for a couple of days?
Of question, hold that thought. There was an address of this. Bear with me. Unless somebody else can put their finger right on it. Somebody else asked this question. And it was addressed in comment number 12, I'm referring to Pete's memo of August 23rd. So, someone, I'm in a position to address that question.
Sorry. Good evening for the record, Eric Privy, Prive. I'm a registered professional engineer with Deprete Engineering, offices at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island. Yeah, that's correct. We did have that as one of the responses for comment number 12 in our memo. I believe this was also on the town website as well. It's an August 23rd memo that I had written. And yes, the septic systems do have pumps, typically in down power situations, greatly reduced in water consumption, right? Because people aren't typically taking showers as much. Water heaters are going down because the electricity is out. Assuming they don't have generators themselves. But the pumps, they do have about a 3-day storage that they can hold, the septic tanks can hold directly on the site. So other than that, it would, at that point, it would start to back up just like any septic, would as well. So, but it's a 3-day storage that comes with it as well. So.
Okay, when it backs up, where does all that stuff go?
So typically, like anything, if when I flush, if I had a problem and it was coming into my own tub, I would stop flushing and I would have to find other ways to do things.
Into the house, not under the ground.
No, correct. No, everything's contained in the piping into the house. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Mr. Peavy. Mr. Peavy.
Oh, sir.
Is there any provision or any discussion for an emergency generator for just this situation to relieve any concerns that people have?
So typically it's done at the homeowner level. So there would be that same answer for the wells, there will be, it's a community public well. So there would be a generator associated with that one, but for individual homes, not typically. It's up to each homeowner. If the homeowner wants to have a generator for themselves, it's not like a commercial application where you could have somebody just roll it to a different area. It's not typical. Each homeowner would be up to their decision if they wanted to.
Now, from my point of view, the plan is to install a whole new community in this area. 140 homes, that's a community. And you just stated that there is a provision for a generator to supply water. Why not another one to supply power to these pumps in an emergency situation?
Right, so they're individual. So for each house, each house has its own pump going to it. So the difference on the community well system is that would be in a centralized pump location. That would be saying that 140 homes have to be guaranteed to have generators, one for each home along the way. I haven't seen that being requested of any subdivisions, regardless of community versus non-community wells. Non-community septic system. So it's a request that I haven't seen before, quite honestly.
So just to have them on an emergency standby for the entire system, that doesn't seem reasonable.
It's not something that I've seen before.
One generator requires 140 homes just for the septic.
It's a big one.
That's
Yeah, it would be. But they don't take all that much power.
It's similar to anytime you have power outages with septic systems, it tends to regulate itself, right? It's anything beyond 3 days, people are looking for other avenues anyway. They're going to another location, or you can't typically sustain off of a non-power situation for long periods of time regardless.
Is some of the answer that the homeowner owns that? Like I own my septic system and what it doesn't do.
Correct.
Right. So in this development, the individual homeowners are going to be responsible for your sub pumps, the generators and all that other nonsense. The responsibility for the well is a community issue.
That's correct.
My question is to help take care of this guy's, this gentleman's concerns. So we're gonna make sure that you've got plenty of water to put into the septic system, but after that, you're on your own. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's just follow through on that question, because maybe I was laboring under a different interpretation. So I thought your comment was, in a power outage, you don't have to be overly concerned about the pumps in the septic systems, because our water consumption is going to taper down.
Typically, yes, true.
However, are all these folks gonna have water throughout the power outage?
Yes.
Because now, and again, not everyone is conversant in septic and how they work. You can't keep putting water into a septic system if it's not going anywhere. So the water consumption is not going to go down. In all likelihood, it will increase. So you won't have 3 days worth of storage.
No, it typically goes down because what are you typically using water for? You're doing dishes, you're taking showers, your hot water heater is down. So you're not, unless you're taking a cold shower, so the consumption tends to go down.
Yes, but you're still using water. People will get imaginative. So I was under the impression that there would be no water.
There is water. Just
So that really sets up a whole different dynamic in my mind.
Sure.
Now I can use all the water that I want, but I can't get rid of it. No, that's not so hot. Anyway, just a thought. I'm not asking you to solve the problem right now, but that would set up a conundrum in my mind.
there are plenty of locations that have public water and septic systems. I mean, it's not uncommon to have a public water and even individual septic systems. It's very common.
That doesn't mean I want it. I understand, but these systems are driven by electronics. So if there's no power, this is not like a gravity system.
Agreed, 100%.
You don't
Yep,
have to worry about it.
correct. Yep.
No, I don't need to worry about that. Steve, did you have a thought?
At this point, as you know from our comments, we don't have the design of the septic systems and pumping systems. But just one comment I'd like to make before they design the system is that typically with these Advantex pumps and septic tanks, the water level varies. You know, it's full, the pump comes on, it goes down. So if you're a homeowner where the tank is just about to turn on, your tank is full. So we're really not going to have any capacity. So I just want to make sure that when we say we have 3 days worth of storage, that's probably assuming that the tank is empty, but half of them are probably going to be full. So we just want to make sure that that's addressed when we see the design.
Yes.
I keep coming back. I keep coming back to condition 3 of the approval where it says, the applicant shall provide public drinking water wells unless proven infeasible and communal septic with denitrification. It seems like this has gone backwards and we're providing the water wells because that is, I guess, feasible. But the communal septic, which doesn't have the same clause about being infeasible, is not there, right? We're going with individual septic as opposed to communal septic. And I think that's where the conundrum lies. At least that's the part that I can't grok, right? Because the water's coming in and the hot water might not be, but where does it go?
Yeah, I might respectfully disagree. I don't see it that way. There is a community septic system. Treatment is on an individual level.
Maybe we're defining septic differently. I'm talking about the septic tanks.
No, I'm talking about the dispersal there.
You're talking about the leach fields and the, yeah, well,
How are we gonna get it there?
Well, that is.
That's the conundrum. I think we're on the same page.
Jim, your thought?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see the applicant here explore other types of community septic systems. I mean, I can think of condominium units of, one in particular I can think of in Charlestown. There's 150 condos in this development. And they just put in, matter of fact, GZA just designed the system. It's for the condominium development. And it's a package plant, meets denitrification, had to be denitrification because you're in the sand plant area. And it was put in right there, and everybody's effluent goes to this thing where it's treated for nitrogen communally and just disposed of. And once the nitrogen is taken out, I don't think you have a problem about so much as to where it's going. That's where, in my mind, just like even in the city areas where you have sewer systems. When you lose power up in where I grew up, you have water coming into your house and it goes out your house. You can flush your toilet, you can take your bath, you don't have electricity. But down here in these areas, we rely on electricity to pump our water out of the ground and to take all these denitrification systems have an electronic component. So it's not just the homes in that development, but anybody that's got a denitrification system, when you lose power, if you don't have it hooked up to a generator, you're done. So, in my mind, for 140 homes to go in there, it really demands a package plant like this project in Charlestown that I'm thinking of that takes care of their sewage that way. Rather than, okay, we got 140 people basically on their own for half of the septic system. I personally can't see it myself.
Well, I would add that would make a lot of the problems go away, ones that we're discussing this evening. And it would also eliminate the issue of the homeowner being responsible for the maintenance of their D-night components, which I still haven't figured out how that's going to work. That means there are 140 operation and maintenance agreements that have to be executed. They have to be inspected once a year. If somebody's got to cough up the $300 or $400 for that contract to remain in place. The package approach, and again, I'm wandering outside of my area of expertise, would certainly eliminate all those issues. I love Jim, I like your idea.
Yeah, I also like what Jim was talking about. And one last thing to point out, when the power was out for 3 days in my neighborhood, I think everybody on my street, except for one house, had a generator running, and it was a gas generator. It's noisy. Mine's gas. It's noisy. I have solar panels on my roof, and I have the opportunity to put a battery in my basement. So there it is. There's power all the time. So the proliferation of power during outages, it's there. It's accessible. So if I can imagine of the 140 homes, I'd expect at least 70 to have some sort of backup power system installed, possibly more, particularly as we get further down in the phases and that battery technology comes down in price. So it makes more sense.
Sorry, yes.
Hi, Eric Bibler, Woodville Road. I'm not conversant with all the details of the communal septic system, but I just wanted to raise a concern from my personal experience. I live in a residential compound. As you know, Mr. Chairman, you surveyed it back in 1985, I think, something like that. And we have 7 property owners that are part of the homeowners association, basically. And we all have to contribute dues to maintain our private road, keep it clear, do snow plowing, that kind of thing. A communal septic is going to belong, or the responsibility for keeping this in operating condition is going to be the responsibility of 140 residents. And I think someone here mentioned something about 140 different, operating and maintenance agreements, which basically rely on the good faith of all those people being able to administer that process and collect those dues or whatever they have to do. They probably have to every year collect money and build a capital balance so that at the end of 5 years or 10 years or whatever the period is, they're going to have to do periodic maintenance. There may have to be some major overhaul that needs to get done in 20 years. You know, septic systems don't last forever. And I just think something like, you ought to consider whether something like that ought to be bonded, you know, and if initially, you know, at construction, and then have the homeowners take it over, you know, and then pay that down over time, or some mechanism. Because just on a micro level, I can tell you that we had 2 homes at one point, or different points in time, go into foreclosure. And that process took years, and we didn't collect those dues, you know, from those homeowners during that period of time. We had other people plead hardship. And it's been just a perennial problem from time to time to get people to pay dues, not just on a timely basis, but in arrears and everything else. So, you know, just pragmatically, you know, collecting the money and administering that entire process so that this communal septic system will actually work, you know, could be a challenge. And I think there ought to be some mechanism that ensures that that happens, and then maybe, you know, the dues get collected against that or something like that. I don't know what you want to do. I'm not here to design it for you, but I think it's related, you know, to this other problem of, you know, I don't see how you can have a system where people have water and they can flush toilets, and they don't understand that's going to back sewage up into their kitchen sinks, you know, or whatever it is. You know, that just doesn't seem like a feasible system. Anyway, just had that.
Let's see, I saw this hand in the back first, and John,
Hello, Sherry Aronian, Guy Hill Road. I am in a butter to the project. I read through the memos from Crossman, but they did a very thorough job. Thank you. I also read Decreed Engineering's comments too, and I just wanted to touch on one of them that caught my eye rather. When it comes to the offsite improvements, they had mentioned that it's their intent to perform the construction of the offsite improvements concurrent with phase 1 of the subdivision. I'd like to point out something in our land and subdivision regulations that does state that the offsite improvements need to be done prior to the planning board issuing any final approval and any recording of this project. It's section 8.6.4. I can read it for the record if I should. I guess I'll just read it. All up here. Public improvement guarantee proposed arrangements for completion of the required public improvements, including construction schedule and/or financial guarantees, shall be reviewed and approved by the planning board at the time of preliminary plan approval. Where the construction of public improvements and infrastructure are required, the preliminary plan for major land development projects and major subdivisions shall be valid for 2 years unless otherwise authorized by the planning board. All public improvements and infrastructure shall be completed to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works by the developer within 2 years from the initial date of the preliminary plan approval and prior to the approval and recording of the final plan of the major land development project, unless otherwise authorized by the planning board. A final plat must be endorsed and recorded in the land evidence records of the town before any lot or parcel indicated on the plat can be sold or conveyed. There's a little bit more, but I'll stop there because that basically touched on what I was looking to say. The last thing I had tonight was I had submitted a letter to the planning board for your packet, and I had asked if it could be discussed, and I didn't know if tonight was the proper venue for that or not. I can certainly resubmit it another meeting if this is not a good meeting for this, but I would like the planning board's thoughts on what I had written.
sorry, I don't think I have it in front of me. Maybe it's submitted previously in a different package, I apologize for that. If there was something that you'd like to discuss, there's no problem touching upon it now, or bring it to our attention, and we can get into it more deeply if you have.
It's not in your packet? It is, okay, okay.
Might be in another packet.
Oh, Emily, yes?
Hold on.
Oh. August 22nd, yeah. I wanted to make sure I got it in before this
I have it.
week's.
The front page was email from Jen.
Oh, yeah,
Or was it-
sure. Yep.
it has a heading.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, yeah, just, there's like five topics I wanted to, and no worries if you hadn't, had a chance to read it over and think it over, because you probably have to, might be hard to answer on the fly, but, positive or negative, feedback, would be great to hear, regarding these topics. Not looking to put anybody on the spot, but I'll just read through them real quick since,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, I think I had read this kind of at the other meeting too, but this time I'm just asking just for some discussion amongst you guys to see, what your thoughts are, positive, negative, whatever. This is on number 1, on page 8 of number 23 of the preliminary plan. That's, the big map, I think, that was up at the last meeting. Infiltration pond G is approximately 400 feet from our house. And basically, a detention pond of this magnitude catching runoff for such a large subdivision concerns us as far as groundwater contamination, runoff, and erosion, because so much of this is sheeting downhill, heading our way. And we're wondering if the board could entertain a request of the applicant to move this infiltration pond so it's not so close to abutters. Unfortunately, with this project, everything is right on top of people who already live there. It's not set up against Arcadia where there's no one there who's drawing water or worried about runoff because there's nobody there, but it's all right near us. So unfortunately, we have to bring these things up. Number 2, due to the size and scope, that's largely why I'm here, is just because it's the size of this development. Similar to a performance bond, can we request that there's sufficient funds by the applicant in the event there are negative occurrences? I don't know what it's called, an escrow. I don't think it's a performance bond because they're not. Performance bond is if they're putting a road in, I believe. But basically, we're just looking for some sort of financial guarantee because of the size and scope that us and other abutting property owners are not negatively impacted by the potential size and scope of this project. I had looked on the preliminary plan and I couldn't see the wellheads on it. Maybe I missed it. I just couldn't find it. But I know there's a pump house pretty close to us, and I don't know if a pump house is something that's drawing water. That again is about 300 feet away. So basically, I'm just looking for a little more protection, other than experts stating that it's okay, because of and the topography back there is from what I've heard a little bit rough. We just want to make sure that, water quality won't change and water flow won't change with what we currently have now. Number 3, since we don't know who the contractor or builder for this project will be, and it's possible the lots could be sold off to multiple builders, we would like to see a construction management company hired by the town and paid for by the developer. I think they had mentioned that, Dupree did mention that, and I don't know that they were amenable to that, but I'd like to hear some discussion on it. To see what the board thinks. It was also a lengthy document. I think it was in the prior packet in August. I don't know if it was in your packet this time, on stormwater facilities and how it raised concerns about potential unmaintained facilities because there isn't a clear ownership and responsibility. The thing with this project, as you guys know, is there's a lot of onus on the homeowners association, much more so than a usual neighborhood. Many neighborhoods, ours included, they never formed a homeowners association, and I don't think it really affected anybody. This one, there's so many pivotal things that the homeowners association is responsible for, including maintenance of swales, detention ponds, to ensure that they don't fail, that I don't know how we guarantee that the homeowners association will be formed. How do you force somebody to volunteer to be on a homeowners association, let alone put funds into it? That's a question I think we gotta, discuss at some point. The last thing, the last thing was just, basically that, the board please have them adhere to all the conditions in the master plan. probably too premature to talk about road improvements tonight, but that can be at another meeting. I guess that's it.
Yeah, good, thank you. I appreciate your refreshing us on a couple of these thoughts. I may not be in a position to address every one of them.
Mhm.
Item number one, I think we've already, at the request of another thing, asked the applicant to take a look at the relocation of ponds.
Okay.
We might have to revisit how we arrange some protection for existing wells. I'm just not conversant on mechanism that we might use for that, although it's very important. Item number three, I would like to touch on this. I read through the tweet memo in detail, and just an overarching comment. I think it's great that we get comments like it's not the applicant's intent. Okay, that's good. That tells us what the direction is, but I would make it clear both to the applicant and to the audience that on some of these topics, construction management, deed restrictions, while it might not be the applicant's intention, any motion to approve this project, I'm going to suggest that these become conditions of approval. So we're going to address your concerns about it. What I think is item number three. I don't know how to deal with the homeowners thing. I'm gonna probably have to tax maybe to give us some feedback. I understand the problem. I don't know how to solve it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to, bring it up so that it's at the front of everybody's mind, that's all.
So those are my only comments on your.
Okay, thank you.
Just to remind Louise, everything that you brought up, I've already made notes about before I saw your email.
Okay.
Along with a lot of other things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anyone else in the audience who should be heard? Sharon, you had a question or comment?
Sharon Davis, Cedarwood Lane. These are comments that were also made by Carol DeRosa. She's out of town due to a death in her family. And so I promised that I would also bring them up, and they have been also presented by other people, but I still want to reiterate them. And the first is, of course, the widening of both Sawmill Road and Dye Hill Road to 22 feet, et cetera. I still want that to happen. Number two is what Sherry talked about, was that all public improvements and infrastructure has to be completed within 2 years from the individual date of the preliminary plan approval. So also still pushing that. And the third one is to request a construction manager. Even though they did not think we needed one, I will come down on the side and say, yes, I think we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience?
Barbara Capalbo. I just wanted to say, when we were talking about the septic and water, I live at Bethel Village. We have Bethel Village Water Association because we have a communal well. And everyone has individual septics because we have half-acre lots, 52 houses in the grouping, and we all take care of our own septic, period. Wells, however, we did just put in a generator, thank you God, for water during something like this. Indeed, we don't necessarily have generators. Your bigger lots and your bigger houses may indeed have those, but we had probably, I'd say 5 or 6 generators in the 52 homes. We really didn't have very many. So I have no idea what they had a problem with on septic, but we were very happy to have water. And we don't have a homeowners association. We do have a water system. My husband's the treasurer. And yes, we have a problem once in a while with people paying, but generally we'll take them to court and that's fine. But overall, everyone pays, especially because water is crucial. But I find that with septic, because it is such a difficulty, it's sometimes better just to leave it to each homeowner. And you've got, I think, larger acreage than certainly we had. And perhaps that would be helpful. I know this is going to be a big problem. It's a difficult area, and I am very sorry that the roads probably have to get widened. The gentleman earlier talked about underground utilities. When that came up at council meeting, we were discussing both Skunk Hill and Brushy Brook at the same time. Skunk Hill did not mention underground utilities, but Brushy Brook, when it was a solar project, did. They had suggested that that might be something they'd be interested in, but that was a solar project, not the housing development. I just wanted to clarify that because it was discussed at the same time, so that might be a misconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience this evening? See no hands. So, I think we're prepared to entertain a motion to continue. Feel so inclined.
I'll make a motion to continue the preliminary plan public hearing until October 6th, 15.
Good, I have a motion. Second. Have a couple of seconds, that's good. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, you're a yes.
Roberts, yes. Linda, yes.
Like, yes,
Shamjini, yes.
Good, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, continuing with our agenda, under new business. Solicitor's report.
Chairman, members of the board, 2 items to report on the remedy appeal. Actually, 3 items, pardon me. The remedy appeal has been continued yet again from a decision in September to October due to a conflict of one of the parties. I don't know who, whether it's the zoning board or one of the attorneys or whatnot, but in any event, that's been continued, and I believe the date is October the 21st. It's whatever that Thursday is within that week. Second item is there has also been an appeal filed, I think you all know, of the Stone Ridge application. There have been emails back and forth this afternoon on setting that date. I believe that will also be on the same agenda on October 21st. I have not yet filed a memorandum in that case, but I will be doing so in the next week or 2. And finally, the third item, just to bring to your attention, and I forwarded you a copy of this, is a decision from the Superior Court in a very old case, which was filed in 2008 and seemingly abandoned by the parties for a very long period of time. But in any event, the decision was filed on August 20th, 2021, wherein the town's decision, which granted a master plan approval with conditions, which had then been appealed by the developer. There's a comprehensive permit. It had been appealed by the developer to SHAB, the State Housing Appeals Board, wherein SHAB reversed the decision as far as the conditions were concerned and granted approval to the Clark Falls application. Then the town took a further appeal of SHAB's decision to the Superior Court, and the SHAB's decision was upheld. So now the decision for the town, which is under discussion, as I understand it, with the town council, is whether or not it would be appropriate for the town to pursue any further appeals at the Superior Court, the Supreme Court on this application, or whether to let the Superior Court's ruling go unchallenged. I don't have a decision for you on that, but I'm sure the town council will be making that determination soon.
Very good, thank you. Just a couple of questions. So on the, forgive me for names, Clark's Falls, whatever.
Yes.
So is that decision, to pursue or not to pursue, is that the town council making that decision?
Yes.
Okay. And then, one before that, mentioned there was an appeal recently filed on
Stone Ridge.
Stone Ridge. Who they appealing to?
The zoning board of review.
Did that just happen?
About maybe 10 days ago, or thereabouts.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item, plans report.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank you. Correspondence and updates. We have a letter from a member of the public dated 8/6/21. Everybody has that in their packet. I don't think I have to do anything on that. Next item on the agenda, public forum. And forgive me, something tells me I spaced this off last week, where it wasn't on the agenda.
No, we didn't, it was not on the agenda.
I'm like, wait a minute, I missed something. Anyone in the public wishing to be heard? Okay, very good. Date of the next meeting is October 6th. And let me just return that I also spaced off a minute approval extension request earlier in the agenda. I got a check mark next to it, but somebody told me I did not do that.
This is Talia, Senior Planning Clerk. You did not. I think it was caught up in the hubbub of all of the technical problems that we were having. I am again requesting an extension to file the minutes. It will not impact anyone's ability to view the minutes. It will not impact my ability to record the decisions made. I just need more time to put the minutes down for a 3-hour plus meeting.
Understood. Thank you. If I remember correctly, no motion required on this?
Correct.
Okay, Molly, thank you very much. Okay, returning to the agenda, next date of the next meeting is October 6th. And if there's nothing that can be given before us, I'm prepared to take a motion to adjourn. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting. I have a motion. I have a second for the discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? You're a yes. Oh, yes. You're a yes.
Like, yes.
Very good, thank you all.
I'm ready. Sorry. I'm gonna go all take one.
What, meanwhile,
So I don't know if it's saved in the effort, but I'm not gonna.
you know, I had to talk to you about this brushing.
It doesn't make a difference.
We still want to know.
Mike,
Yeah, so we. Well, we'll wait till we're not on.
I'm pretty much sure, yeah. I don't know, I'll donate to some concerned citizen. Better to show up.
Gentlemen. Bye, Maggie, Jim. Good night.
Good night, Carolyn.
This was
I should, right? I'm spending my anniversary with you guys. That's what you're like.